Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today I am sharing 5 books for Native American Heritage Month that honor Indigenous voices and challenge how we think about history, identity, and land. As a reminder, we should be reading diversely throughout the year, and these Heritage Months are nice to sometimes check in and make sure we are doing that. So, like I said, I have 5 books to share with you today. None of them I have read yet, but I do hope to get to them in the near future. I'm going to start with 2 nonfiction because November is also Nonfiction November, where people on BookTube celebrate by reading any nonfiction that they like. I am planning a separate nonfiction November video, so hopefully, if I'm able to film it, that should go up hopefully next week. Okay, so let's start. First up, we have This Land is Their Land, The Wampanoag Indians, Plymouth Colony, and the Troubled History of Thanksgiving by David J. Silverman. So this book re-examined the familiar story of the first Thanksgiving. You all know the story. The Pilgrims and the Indians are besties, and they sit down to dinner to give thanks for the harvest. I live in Massachusetts. Plymouth is only a short drive south from where I live, and the Wampanoag Nation is a federally recognized tribe here in Massachusetts. Maybe the only one, I'm not entirely sure. Silverman begins this book by describing how in 1621 the Wampanoag people sought an alliance with the newly arrived Plymouth colony settlers, in part because the Wampanoag were recovering from devastating epidemics and facing pressure from rival tribes. This alliance is what became mythologized as a peaceful harvest feast. However, the underlying agreement was for mutual defense and diplomacy, not just sitting down sharing a friendly meal. Over the next 50 years, the balance changed dramatically. The English population grew, colonial, legal, and land systems were threatening Indigenous use, tensions mounted, and then the peace collapsed after 50 years, and many Wampanoag people were killed, displaced, and enslaved. Silverman argues that the conventional Thanksgiving narrative obscures the deeper story of land, power, dispossession, and survival, and he challenges the simplistic happy pilgrims, friendly Indians myth, and offers, hopefully a fuller history in which the Wampanoag played a major role. They were not just cast members in the Thanksgiving story, but actors with agency facing enormous challenges. And out of all of the books on this list, I'm probably going to start with this one for the reason that I live here in Massachusetts. As kids, we've all gone to Plymouth to see Plymouth Rock. And if you've ever seen it, most people are like, that's it? And we were kids, we were all told this story, and I don't know what the kids are being taught this day, so I'm not sure how accurate it is, but again, so I am looking forward to reading this book. The next nonfiction is By the Fire We Carry: The Generations Long Fight for Justice on Native Land by Rebecca Nagle. So this was published, I think, in 2025. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize in 2025. And Nagle is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And this book follows the long-standing fight for tribal land and sovereignty in eastern Oklahoma, starting with the forced removal of the Muscogee Nation in the 1830s, then shifting to a 1990s murder case on Muscogee land that raised the question of whether the state of Oklahoma had jurisdiction to execute the man who committed the murder. And this is because the tribe's reservation status was questioned. This murder case eventually led to the 2020 McGirt versus Oklahoma State Supreme Court decision, a landmark decision that affirmed that large portions of eastern Oklahoma still legally remained tribal land. And in here, Nagle interweaves personal, historical, and legal narratives to show how systemic dispossession, treaty violations, the exploitation of land and mineral rights, and Indigenous resistance are connected. The fight is not just for land, but for recognition of sovereignty and justice. I am particularly interested in this book for the reason that my career background is in the legal industry. I'm not an attorney, but I've started my career as a paralegal, and I've worked in law firms for, 20 years. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I left the law firms and I'm now working in-house for a renewable energy company. And in my specialty of law is real property. It's real estate, essentially dirt. So land rights are very important to me, and knowing how land is tracked and land goes from person to person, that's always been part of my career. And I've worked on many types of real estate transactions, residential, commercial, all types of, office buildings and hotels. And like I said, now I'm working in renewable energy. So large scale wind farms and solar farms, and you need a lot of land for that. But the one type of land that I've never worked on is ancestral land, reservation land. Who owns it? Who holds title? Who has the rights to it? And so I'm hoping that this will give me some insight into type of land that I've never worked on, I don't understand very well. And so that's why I'm very interested in this book. All right, so now we're going to move on to the fiction. And the first is Housemaid of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. Momaday is of Kiowa and Cherokee heritage, and he spent most of his upbringing on various reservations in the Southwest. Housemaid of Dawn is his first novel, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature in 1969. And in this book, we are following a young Native American man named Abel, who returns from fighting in World War II to his home in a Pueblo community in New Mexico. He struggles to reintegrate into his culture and the land after the alienation of war. He then drifts into urban life in Los Angeles, where he experiences further dislocation, violence, and alcoholism. This book is supposed to explore themes of cultural displacement, the disabling effects of war, identity, tradition versus modernity, and the healing power of returning to roots and land. Next is Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. Talty is a citizen of the Penobscot Nation, which is located in Maine, and this was published in 2024. We follow Charles Lemosway, a man in his 50s living just across the river from the Penobscot Reservation. Though he was raised on that same reservation by his white mother and his Native American stepfather, he is forced to leave the reservation when he's 18 because he doesn't meet the tribal blood quantum rules. Years later, Charles quietly watches the life of his daughter Elizabeth, whom he fathered in the early 90s with Mary, a Penobscot woman. Mary marries another Penobscot man and records him as the father, meaning Charles remains a distant observer of her life. And so this book is supposed to explore identity, family, culture, and the meaning of home. What does it mean to belong? Is it determined by blood or by the relationships we choose? And last, we have American Indian Stories by Zitkala-Ša. And this is a collection of autobiographical essays, short stories, and poems published in the early 1900s that recount Zitkala-Ša's experiences growing up as a Yankton Dakota girl on the reservation, as well as her time in a missionary boarding school where she was forced to cut her hair, give up her language, and wear white clothing. And she also recounts her later work as a teacher and activist. And this collection is supposed to offer a powerful and personal account of a young Native American woman navigating between two worlds, her Dakota heritage and mainstream American, highlighting conflicts of identity, culture, language, and power at the turn of the 20th century. So that is all I have for you today. 5 books celebrating Native American Heritage Month. Have you read any of these? Please let me know. I would love to hear from you. And what are you currently reading for Native American Heritage Month? Please feel free to suggest some things for me. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great day. Bye.